I don't know what your motivation is for being a disciple of Christ. Most of us found ourselves disciples of Christ before we had any choice to make up our minds. And that's okay. But somewhere along the line, each one of us who claims to be a disciple of Christ had to make up our minds to follow him, or to just go along and pretend. And I just presume none of us are doing that. So we find ourselves probably in the same position as James and John, because most people, when they first make their decision for Christ to answer his call, do it for selfish motives, to be saved, go to heaven. That's all right with me. I mean, I'm all in favor of that, and so is the Lord Jesus. But gradually, if we stay with him, it becomes apparent to us, hopefully, that this isn't the primary reason that we were called to be disciples. Now, these lads, James and John, had been with Jesus from the very beginning, and right before this gospel, in the last few Sundays, you heard Jesus 3 times predict what was going to happen to him because of the way he was acting. What was he doing? He was teaching the people to love one another. He was healing their illnesses and all those good things. But he was going to be killed for it, as he realized. And I think a lot of other people realized that he was skating on thin ice. But these boys didn't seem to get it. They were still concerned with their own personal well-being, salvation, as they said, sitting on thrones. I'm not even sure they were where we probably were when we accepted Christ initially and thought of our own salvation. They seemed to be into something worldly, sitting on thrones and governing people and being in charge. I guess the point is that, you know, if you stick with Christ, you gradually will be weaned of your initial motivation for being a Christian. And you will gradually come up to the realization that being a Christian is much more involved than just praying in a certain way or professing a certain creed, but it means a way of life. And of course, the way of life is one of service, as Jesus said in the last lines of his response to these gentlemen who were seeking thrones. I have not come to be served, but to serve and to give myself for others. And that, of course, is the real Christian creed. That's the real thing that Christians do. And to the extent that we fail to do that, we fail Christ. Now, you're all probably aware that there's a lot of unrest and dispute and contention within the Christian family today, whether it's the Catholic Church or the Christians altogether. There's a certain disturbance, and I think it's because we're at the point where we have to ask ourselves whether we've been following Christ as we want to or as he wants us to. In our own church, we're still sort of in the Middle Ages in many ways. Not everybody, not even all our leadership, but we just don't seem to have broken into the modern world to the extent that what we're saying in our religion is touching the lives of people. Now, you may say, well, that's not true, because in my parish there were 38 people who became Christians on the vigil of Easter. But the statistics show for the nation that for everyone who becomes a Catholic, four leave the church. So the message that there's something, if people aren't evil, we're all evil, I guess, at certain times, but we're not evil people. And the people who are leaving are not evil people. And so we should be asking ourselves, what's wrong? And I think what's wrong is that Christians no longer see themselves, by and large, as the servants, and the Greek word is slave, of the world in which they live. Like Jesus, we are not serving others. And if you think back on your own religious life in our church, And maybe this is because we were initially an immigrant church, but boy, that's a long time ago. Most of our activity was inward looking, self-preserving. Think about the past. Not reaching out to the general community, not to convert them, but to serve them, whatever their needs were. To an extent, we do that, especially through Catholic charities and things like that. But that's serving at a distance, isn't it? $1 or $1 million in the mail is a very good thing for Catholic charities, but it really doesn't involve us directly. And until we get to the point of service on a personal, a family, a parish, a monastic level, I think people are not going to be connected to Christ because he was the servant of the people. Something to think about. If you want to get a real good image of what the church, and when I say church, I don't mean bishops, I mean us. If you want to get a good image of what we should be, go to Calder Baptist and go into the lobby and make a little meditation on the statue you find there. The statue shows Christ down on his knees washing the feet of Peter. And that's what he calls us to wash each other's feet, serve in any way that's needed.